Very good to be with you, Alex.
Well, this is outrageous. Please tell us what these green shirts / brown shirts did.
Well, we were having a meeting with Americans for Prosperity. I'd been asked to come and give a speech about what was in the Copenhagen Agreement. It's no longer a treaty now. They've downgraded it to an agreement because they know they can't get a treaty through the Senate. That's become very clear. So the whole thing is being driven by your constitution, which still has enough force in it to stop them getting away with everything thereafter. But anyway, I was briefing them on how this was going to be pushed through by Obama. He was going to sign it in Copenhagen. He was then going to put it before both houses of Congress, try and get it through by a simple majority. He might even fail that now. But as I was beginning to speak, in walked, or rather up jumped, people who'd crept in and sat down quietly initially, and they began a kind of robotic Nazi chant. It was just like the Hitler Youth. And indeed, the whole air of this Copenhagen conference has the stink of a Nuremberg rally about it, just at the time when we had hoped that in Europe, in the world, that kind of sort of centralist propaganda and only one system of thought being permitted had been swept away forever. Here it is re-emerging, no longer red, white and black, but now green is the colour that you find on every banner trailing from a public building. Green is the colour of the elaborate displays that the Nazis last used to have in all the main squares in Copenhagen, and now we have exactly the same kind of Nazi displays, but this time advertising climate change as the big enemy. Just as in the old days it was Jews that were the big enemy. Well, frankly, this has begun to upset many people. We had a German person who was in our meeting. He was almost in tears by the end. He said, I never thought that I would see this. He said, I thought we were behind all that. I thought we would never again see the Hitler Jugend on the march, indoctrinated by the party and only putting one point of view. He was really, really, really upset. And of course, that's how terrifying it is for all of us who are here to see the robotic drill with which these people simply talk slogans. None of them know any climate science. None of them know any economics. None of them understand policy making. All of them have been told that the harmless trace gas without which every piece of life, whether plant or animal on this planet, would be dead, is somehow a dangerous pollutant which is going to set the planet on fire. It doesn't get more ludicrous or more sickeningly dangerous than that.
But Lord Monckton, there is a sense of desperation by these people as more universities come out and are proven to be engaged in fraud via UN collusion, directing this. And I would like to you, in the last few minutes we have with you, to speak directly to the useful idiots, the same type that supported Lenin and Hitler and Mao, to understand that the climate cuts now in the treaty, the Danish text, will closely double more cuts in third world than the West has to make, and that this will devastate the third world. Many of the useful liberals believe this was actually a tax on the West to help the third world. Clearly, the IMF and World Bank that have been caught engaged in predator activity against the third world have now been caught that this is all just a giant money-making scam. Can you speak directly to not just the same slogans as Nazis, but that this will result in the deaths of more people than the Nazis killed if implemented?
Let me quote from the UN itself, just for once. There's a man called Herr Ziegler, who is the Right to Food rapporteur for the UN. His job is to make sure that people are aware that there are folks starving around the world. And he said 2 years ago that the biofuel scam was an outrage. He said that to grow biofuels, instead of growing food on agricultural land for people who need it, you grow biofuels instead for clunkers that don't, in the name of saving the planet. What you're doing is causing mass starvation, food riots in a dozen countries of the world, millions dying not because of climate change happening, but because of the sloganizing and the policies of these rich people who are manipulating this for their own profit. People dying now. And Herr Ziegler said this. He said, at a time when so many are starving around the world, to divert agricultural land from growing food to growing biofuels is, and this is his word, a crime against humanity.
Well said. Well, I'm going to skip this break. We've only got a few minutes left with Lord Christopher Monckton. I mean, how did this end with them taking over your event, vitriolically waving American flags, when this treaty will destroy U.S. sovereignty? Even mainstream news is saying the EPA coup of telling Congress, if you don't ratify this, we will, quote, and this is ABC News and Reuters, we will, quote, have a command and control system over you. How dare them flap American flags?
That is an outrage, I agree. What happened was I simply went to the microphones, which were directional, so that I could still be heard in Pennsylvania and the other parts of the United States, all over the states, thousands of people linked in. And the chanters could only be heard very distantly by them in the background. And eventually the chanters realized we were just carrying on with the meeting anyway, and they weren't getting anywhere. So in dribs and drabs, they filed out and rapidly disappeared, no doubt to report on what they thought was their triumph. But I saw them again this morning at their stand inside the conference center in the area where people could set up stands to say whatever they want to say. And they came rushing up to me and they said, how dare you call us Hitler Youth? Because German television had been there. They had interviewed me, and I had said, almost with tears in my eyes, these people have behaved like the Hitler Youth. How dare you call us Hitler Youth, they said. One of them said, I'm a Jew. How dare you call me Hitler Youth? I said, if you ever again come in chanting moronic, robotic slogans and interrupt the right of free speech of others who happen to differ with you on a matter of public policy, then I will once again call you Hitler Youth, for that is what you are. Never has such behavior been seen in Copenhagen since Hitler was in control of it. And if you behave in that way, I will call it like I see it.
But aren't they Hitler Youth, sir, because these policies will result in mass starvation and death, and have already resulted in that?
That is the truth of the matter. I think it's probably fair to say, of course it's very difficult to measure this, it's probably fair to say that more people have been killed by the green movement with this climate scam and the biofuels taking land out of agricultural production, doubling the price of food, pricing food out of the poor people's pockets. They simply can't afford to buy the food. They're living on mud pies made with real mud in Haiti, for heaven's sake. And even they can't now afford the mud pies either, because they've doubled in price, thanks to the biofuel scare. And so, yes, we are now probably seeing more deaths arising from the behavior of the Hitler Youth and, more sinisterly, the people who are behind them and paying for them and indoctrinating them. Those are the ones we really need to track down and root out and shove in jail for the rest of their nasty little lives. Because we are killing people probably in larger numbers now than Hitler did when he killed the Jews. We're killing them of starvation because the West doesn't care about anything except some putative icicle dribbling somewhere in Greenland, all of which is entirely within the natural variability of the climate, as we now know from the ClimateGate emails, which expose the fraud that's been perpetrated by these scientists. On the one hand, they're telling us only this week that this decade has been the warmest since records began 150 years ago, which admittedly is not particularly a surprising conclusion because we've had 300 years of global warming starting in 1695. However, what they are saying privately, whatever they're saying publicly, privately they're saying there has indeed been, as I've been saying on your program and elsewhere for many years, we've had global cooling for many years. In fact, we've now had global cooling for 9 full years. They're admitting this privately in these emails. A very recent one says exactly this. And they're saying it's a travesty that we can't explain it. I can explain it. It's very simple. CO2 doesn't have the warming effect you've been pretending it does. You've been fooled by your own propaganda. Time to go back, get out the abacus and the counting stones, and do your sums again, and throw away those big fancy Xbox 360 models, because they have been leading you astray. And get back to real science and real measurement, and you will find that the outgoing radiation from the Earth's surface is escaping to space. We've measured this just recently, just as much as it always was, which means that the greenhouse gases we're putting in the atmosphere are having hardly any effect on that outgoing radiation at all. Therefore, it isn't staying down here to cause warming. QED, whatever is causing the warming, it certainly isn't CO2,
all right,
except to a very, very tiny extent.
Lord Monckton, you gave us an hour earlier this week. I know you're very busy. I'm going to let you go. We also have G. Edward Griffin here in studio with us. But in closing, I'd like you to give us your website. And then also, you sounded a bit pessimistic a few days ago. Now you sound buoyed, saying that it looks like they're going to have to go the dictatorial, bureaucratic way around the Constitution because even mainstream media is saying their fraud is imploding, especially with the Danish text of the treaty saying the third world has to make right at double the cuts the West did, a bait and switch at the last minute. So give us your website, please, sir. And then in closing, please give us your report, a brief synopsis on things brightening a bit. Or was I wrong in inferring that from what you said?